Hello, hello. Hi guys. I'm so excited to be here with Edu. As we have shared a little bit before, this is kind of like a revamp of the podcast I had been doing from the north, and I'm so happy that Edu's gonna join me now, and we're gonna do it together because our episode was one of the most popular ones, and we have a good relationship where we can really talk about everything and not get mad at each other even when we disagree, and I think we need more of that. So that's what we're going to be doing from the north, me from Miami and Edu is in Canada. So thank
Hey,
you, Edu, so much for doing this with me.
no, thank you so much for doing this with me as well. I'm so happy we're finally doing this. This has been in the works for so long, but it's finally here just for
I've kind of
you.
for Edu for a long time. Like I didn't know how to ask him. Like Edu, you just like make me feel comfortable, and I want a partner. Let's do a show together. And I'm so glad he was down. And basically, as we have said, it's a continuation of the activism that we do online a little bit, which is, of course, a lot of what we call tankies or far leftists, or also the far right wing across the world. They're very well funded with their propaganda, and we find ourselves on Twitter like fighting these machines like the gray zone that are organized and funded, and there's nothing fighting that propaganda. So we're gonna try to do that ourselves, I
We're
guess.
gonna try to bring balance to the force, but we don't have money, so guys,
If you can, get the CIA to notice us, or George Soros, we are glad to take some funds to talk about the things we believe in. And
always.
speaking of that, look at our logo that I created on a free website. Let me know what you guys think about it, because that is the beginning of what will be a whole multinational, multicultural project against authoritarianism anywhere.
All right, so without further ado, ladies and gents and others, this is Eduardo and Germania from the North. We're gonna talk about today, Germania.
We, as the title suggests, from the north, like to look at Latin American affairs, and particularly Venezuela, not only because it's a good example of how, the progressive pretty speech can completely dissolve a country. So we're going to be talking a lot about Venezuela, the biggest crisis in our hemisphere right now, really, and the cycle. So, for those of you guys who know about Venezuelan news and affairs, you will be familiar with this. So, Edu, the regime and the opposition are once again in a foreign country, this time in Mexico, to have the nice Europeans mediate talks. Um, so,
What
what are
is
you
it?
expecting
Is
from
it
this,
like
Edu?
is it like the fourth time they've done this in like 6 years?
I've lost count, but what I do want to point out is all the factions of the opposition are going or are there already. So basically, the main person will be Guaido's guy, who's Gerardo Blyde, and he's like the leader of the opposition side. But like Capriles sent someone, I think Vente probably. I don't know if Vente sent someone
Do you
because
know?
they're.
I'm not sure. Pretty much because at this point I don't really care. Like I'm too tired for this bullshit. So like I really don't care. But what I did read on internet on read on the internet Spanglish guys. What I did read on the internet though is that the alacranes. So for those of you who don't know who the alacranes are, they're basically the fake opposition built up by the government. Are complaining on the internet because they didn't get invited to Mexico.
Wait, so many questions because I didn't know that we're called the Alacranes,
You
like a
didn't
whole
know?
topic. And who would be for you los Alacranes?
Let me Google it. This is the part that we can edit.
No, but like Henry Falcón is an easy
Oh,
one.
Henry Falcone is an easy one, but I mean, like Luis Parra, for example, on
Bueno,
the
pero that's another easy one. That's the guy that like made a deal with the regime to take over the National Assembly, pretending to be in the opposition. But
yeah,
like,
exactly.
is what's Capriles? Is he the real opposition?
No, I mean, it depends on who you ask. I wouldn't say he's the real opposition in the sense that he doesn't represent all of the opposition, but at the same time, nobody really does, and that's a big problem.
The issue we have, everyone, why can't we hold elections to select a representative of the opposition? Like, why is that impossible?
I mean, we had primaries back in 2018. 2012, right? 2012.
That was really we selected leadership. That was for the presidential
That was
election.
for the presidential election, which was lost against Chavez. But regardless, that was the last time the opposition kind of picked the leadership. And back in the day, it was Capriles. The problem right now is that you can't really have leadership of the opposition if none of them can run for office. They're all banned from running from office. Capriles is still banned from running from office. Maria Corina is banned.
But those of us who are critical of the negotiations say is it's no time for elections. Like, what was Guaido supposed to do? Like, overthrow the regime. But instead, they started focusing on like playing government. Like,
But and playing government without having any actual power, which is
but
kind
they
of
do have funds. They have funds enough to pay for the office of the first lady.
oh, we can talk about that. They have funds enough to go to the Yankee Stadium and watch a baseball game. But
Oh,
yeah, and that's honestly like I was reading a kind of poll that they put out the other day. It seems like very reasonable, very good poll. And in Venezuela, 67% of people reject Maduro, and 73% of people reject Guaido. That's the level that the opposition is right now. People hate you more than they hate the dictator.
that's the information that I handle, but yet, and this is what I really want to get into, whenever I say anything critical of the opposition online, like
Mm.
today, I didn't criticize them. I just said, update, we are back. Well, we're always in the cycle, but I was saying now we're in the negotiation stage. And the
Mm.
next step is a fake election
Yeah.
step. And then the politicians start telling people to protest again.
And then
To
hundreds get killed, nothing happens.
for nothing. And then we've been on this merry-go-round for a while. So I just pointed out, I didn't mention dear leader Guaido at all. And immediately, well, what do you suggest? Do not subtract if you're not going to add.
¿Tú qué propones?
Oh,
Pero tú qué propones? Ah,
all right. What do you suggest is always, and these are always, the first world Latin American experts, WOLA, the Caracas intellectual class. They were loving Capriles because Capriles came out saying that the negotiations were a good thing.
here's the thing. Like, here's what I feel it's the status of the Venezuelan opposition mindset right now, and not necessarily just the opposition, but a lot of people that are like intellectuals or influencers or people that could, you know, make a difference in the big scheme of things in the way that we talk about the opposition is that they they are aware that the government is a dictatorship, that there's absolutely no democracy going on in Venezuela, but they feel the necessity of always going back to the system, even though they cannot hold office like Antonio Ledesma, when he won the Alcaldía Metropolitana de Caracas, they took it away from him. All the protectorados they've done with all the states that governors were elected by the opposition. So, like, we know that it doesn't matter. But the real question, what I don't understand, and I honestly don't understand, is like, so why did you go back to it? Say that
Well,
it
we
was.
do point out the Europeans particularly really push this on the Venezuelan opposition.
Yeah.
And Wola types, they tell them this is the only way. Diplomacy, the sanctions are, so you go to sit back at the negotiation table. Now, we understand that, but the problem is if you make, first of all, they decided on a new CNE, the ones that count the votes, right? I
Yeah.
think, and they offer that up like, oh, look, the regime is showing good faith. While they were doing this, they were also ramping up the assaults against the opposition. They arrested Freddy Guevara, your
Yeah.
favorite. They have been coming out against activists. They have been campaigning on the state TV. All of the things that the European Union was saying the regime was not going to do. So why are they going to go to elections to then give the regime legitimacy? That is a problem.
I don't know. That's like the question of $1 million. Why are they doing this? Like, say that it was the first time that they tried this. Say it was the second one that they tried this. But like, this is like the fourth or fifth time that they're trying this. Every year we have the same cycle. The opposition gains momentum. There's
Thanks
crisis in.
of Venezuelans. So Venezuelans go out to protest,
Yeah.
kick guy, and this is how the establishment opposition gains power, and then they use it to negotiate.
But that's the real question that we have to like ask, and we have to ask them. And like, I would love to ask them if I could. Is why are you doing this? Are you doing this for money? Just say it. Like, just say it. You are a politician. You need to get paid. You need to be a mayor to get paid. Like, just come clear. But don't keep selling fake solutions to the people because
We know what they say. We know what their argument is. Their argument is, well, the Marines are not coming. There's not going to be a military intervention. This is the only way out. That's their
that's
argument.
that's their only way out. But like, is it really? We know it's not a way out. We know it's just a return to the status quo. So why are they doing this? Like, they just want to be relevant? Is that how they eat?
It's true that the European Union particularly forces, like, really pushes negotiations on them. But this is why, and I don't like Leopoldo Lopez, but he gave an interview and a phrase that I really liked, a quote, where he's kind of criticizing the Europeans, saying, like, the Europeans say Venezuelans who don't want to go to negotiations are extremists, but that's a very colonialist outlook when you're sitting nice in Europe and you're judging Venezuelans for not wanting to negotiate with a criminal regime.
It's 100%, and it goes to the big flaw of liberal democracies all around the world is that their foreign policy seems to be hands off. Like, we're not gonna get involved because every time that we get involved, there's a disaster. And to be fair, like, we're coming from 2001, we're coming from the Iraq War, we're coming from Afghanistan. We're gonna get to that, by the way.
Yes.
And that's like that Bush era foreign policy seems to like put everyone away from them in the States, both Democrats and Republicans, but also in Europe, all across the spectrum. Everyone's against intervention. Well, when that happens, you're just letting people die. You're letting people starve. You're letting people fall to regimes. You're letting look at what happened in Afghanistan. U.S. troops were called out finally after 20 years of the world worst disaster, I would say, and now the Taliban are taking over.
It's horrible. I mean, the images and the stories coming out of Afghanistan are heartbreaking. And I did want to ask you, Edu, what do you think about the Biden administration's decision to pull out? Because it is, I mean, I do feel like we're abandoning our allies and we went in there and messed things up even more, and
Yeah.
now we're just out. However, I read a take from my friend, my colleague, Danny Rivero from NPR Miami, and he said something that left me like,
Thinking, all
He's
right.
like, what's going on in Afghanistan is awful. However, by staying there, we were just delaying the inevitable. What do you think?
I don't know. I don't know. Like, I feel that if again, this has to do a lot with the normal state of things. Like, if the normal state of things was how's it been for the last 5 years in Afghanistan, where there's barely any presence of troops, but just enough to keep the Taliban, you know, away from power. Yeah, of course, there's nothing happening there. You're just delaying the inevitable. But if you actually have it in your mindset that you actually want to end the Taliban, that you want to support the Afghanistan government to finally take control over the country and not, dealing with this war that they've been going on for like 20 years. If you change the way that you were doing it, for sure. But yeah, the status quo that they were carrying on for years, since Obama, since Trump, since now Biden deciding to pull it out, is having some troops there and then eventually just leave the country and leave them to their luck.
As always, we have to remember the ones who are not going to be pulling out. Iran,
China,
Russia, they're not going anywhere.
Syria, they're not pulling out. And it's like, and it's this, like, I feel that the biggest problem is that this is a bipartisan mindset. It's let's get out of everywhere because we haven't improved anything and it's a lot of money, right? And it's
probably the worst consequence of the Iraq war, that now not only Americans, but people from liberal democracies across the world are traumatized from that effort, and now they do not think that the US can do any good anywhere.
Which is completely fair. And honestly, if we were Venezuelans, if we were both born and raised in the United States, we would probably think the same way. Like, why are we sending our troops, my friends, my family, my tax money? Why are we spending my tax money on foreign countries fighting these wars? But, and it's fair when you look at the history, when you look at Afghanistan, when you look at Iraq, when you look at everything that has happened in the last 30, 40 years.
There are positive examples.
There are, absolutely. Look at,
Positive US intervention. No one talks about them, but they exist.
no one talks about Yugoslavia. No one talks about what NATO did in Yugoslavia. Like they saved millions of people from ethnic cleansing with a very quick and not quick, but a very successful war. And that those kind of things unfortunately have to happen sometimes because sometimes dictators don't want to let go by sanctions.
I always wonder, like, do you think Tulsi Gabbard would have been against World War II? Like, no, no.
There were so many people against World War II, though. Like, the reason the United States got into World War II is because the Japanese bombed them at Pearl Harbor. But back in the day, they were also anti-war.
That's true. That's true.
Even in like World War One, they got in very late into the party.
You
Very.
think that this is like, and recently I have learned that being neoconservative, like apparently the actual definition is something I believe in, that the US has a moral responsibility to have a presence abroad and spread democracy.
But that's
Like,
that.
neoconservative?
I believe in that, but that doesn't make you a neoconservative or a neocon. And that's the another thing. This good thing that you brought that up is that political etiquettes are only harmful. They're only harmful because they're trying to put people in a box. It's like you're a leftist, you have to believe this. You're a right wing, you have to believe this, or the other way around. You believe this, therefore you're a leftist. You believe this, therefore you're right wing. So no, you don't have to have a tough foreign policy mindset to be like to necessarily be a neoconservative. I'm a very liberal person, like in all aspects of my life, and I believe in social programs and in welfare and all that stuff. But I would also love my country and my country, Canada, and the organization that we made part of, NATO, to actually take an active role in the world to stop China, to stop Russia, to bring democracy back to the countries that need it, to Venezuela, to Nicaragua, to Cuba, to Hong Kong, to Belarus.
Most like lefties will understand it as like they'll think that by saying this we're asking for boots on the ground in these countries.
We want
No,
help.
there are freedom fighters in these countries. People want freedom on their own.
We just want help because we cannot get in anywhere else. We just want help. Thanks to our subscribers in our Patreon, by the way. No.
Well, we'll do that in the end, I guess. I don't know how to be a YouTuber yet, but you gotta do the whole subscribe, comment, like.
Yeah. Manito arriba.
I wanted to go back to the Venezuela negotiation thing because I recently read what do you call it? A suggestion by Francisco Rodriguez. I don't know if you know who he is. He's an economist. I think he used to be Chavista, and now he's one of those like in the middle. We gotta negotiate, hates the US. So he said, what about asking for this in the negotiation table? Because clearly asking Maduro to go as of now is a no-go. They have no reason to do that.
Yep.
But what about we'll go to elections and Maduro can run, but no more re-election?
That's fair. Honestly, I'm gonna tell you something that's very I don't know the word for it, but you could disagree with me, okay, and that's fair. But I honestly think that if we ever achieve like a democratic transition, even if it's not like a peaceful transition, but if we ever achieve a transition to democracy, we need to allow the Chavismo to participate on it. Now,
I got in a lie the other day for saying this.
Now, that doesn't mean that we're just gonna forget about the crimes. So they were corrupt, if they were in the military and they committed horrible crimes against protesters or whatever, or the opposition or whatever. Yeah, of course, you have to have justice there. But you need to allow Chavismo to be part of democracy. And
Wait. I'm not sure if I'm not understanding. Because my position is obviously you need to like get the country back together, forgive, and that means accepting Chavistas, ex-Chavistas into our new democracy. But I do think as a party, the PSV needs to be.
I agree. I 100% agree with that. I was gonna say that. Oh, look at us. There you go. Yeah, no, 100%. I agree. The PSV, like as an institution, it's a political party to oppress the Venezuelans, and just by that and the fact that they've been doing it for so long, the institution itself shouldn't exist. It should be completely banned, like the Nazi Party was banned in Germany. That doesn't mean that we're going to ban former or even ideological Chavistas to participate in our democracy.
A lot of people think that by saying we need to ban Chavismo, they hear, oh, the left. No, 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 no. You cannot ban the left.
No.
Chavismo is a party, a movement. It's not, the social democracy or progressiveness.
And even then, if you ban the party and you allow former Chavistas to run, let's say you allow Delcy Rodriguez to run, do you honestly think that if we ever regain true democracy and freedom of speech, Venezuelans are going to vote for Delcy Rodriguez? No.
She's one of the ones that needs to go to jail.
I mean, obviously, I'm just saying hypothetically, because I don't want to name another. I don't know any Chavista that is not going to jail, but let's say Delcy Rodriguez. Let's say she actually was not corrupt.
This is when I start fantasizing and I'm like, I imagine in my head, like all of them going to jail. Like first, Diosdado has to be the first one.
Oh my God. I daydream about that a lot.
Padrino Lopez.
You know what? I'm going to say something very, very... Don't take this too seriously. But of all the people in Chavismo, I don't have a lot of hate towards Maduro as a person. He's just dumb. He's kind of dumb. I don't feel him as mean. I just feel him as dumb. But Diosdado, he's mean. He's evil. He's a bad person. Maduro is like, ooh, Peter.
That about them, and I had this conversation with my family always because I find it hard to believe in caricatures of people. So to me, it's hard to believe that, Maduro sits there and he's like, yes, I'm murdering my own people and I like it. Or even Diosdado, like part of me wonders, like, do they think they're in the right side of history? Like, do they believe in socialism or?
I believe, and this is just my hypothesis, I guess, is that they feel that they're entitled to that because of the oppression that they suffered before by, all of your cat, by Adecos and los Copellanos. And to some extent, like look at Jorge Rodriguez and Delcy Rodriguez. Like to some extent, that's completely fair. Like their dad got murdered by what we call the democracy.
But when you and I have talked about this, and we should have a whole episode where we just talk about, the flawed democracy that was Venezuela before, because it wasn't as good as some people like to picture. There was still political persecution. There was people exiled. However, with that example, Jorge Rodriguez, who if someone is evil, that guy, gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah.
For real. Him and his sister. But his father was actually like a terrorist. Like he was like a Marxist who thought that through violence they should get power. And still, he died in the government's hands by torture, which is completely wrong. However, the president at that time came out, was honest about what had happened, and the people who murdered this terrorist were punished. And the government apologized, which is different. Now they do that in Venezuela, and you never hear what happened to the disappeared. So
there was accountability. Like, for once, it was a flawed democracy for sure. Like, all countries in Latin America were back in the 90s. But there was accountability. Like, we got Carlos Andres impeached, like, and for very serious corruption allegations that were found out to be true. And a lot of the things that happened, back in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, the reason why we had a guerrilla, the reason why we had such a Marxist, Leninist, very strong movement in Venezuela, especially in the universities, is because from the get-go, the democracies banned the communists from running on elections from 1950 since El Pacto de Punto Fijo. And that set the course, so these people got radicalized, they got into the guerrilla because they couldn't participate in democracy. So when people say, oh, we should just ban Chavismo, we should make Chavismo, we should make socialism, we should make communism illegal. No, because just let them run for office. People are not stupid. People are not going to vote for openly communist. They didn't do it for Chavez. Chavez wasn't a socialist.
No, yo no soy socialista. No, yo creo que ya el mundo de hoy, la América Latina que viene, requiere un salto adelante.
say one word.
So
Peru.
yeah, but like, hear me out. Peru didn't vote for Keiko Fujimori. In fact, a lot
They
of
voted communist.
I know because they haven't. Their most recent memory was Alberto Fujimori, as our most recent memory was Perez Jimenez. Like
Which,
whenever
by the way, I love how again the first worlders like to separate things between left and right, and Fujimori is seen as a right-wing dictator. However, one of the first terrible things that Chavez did was protect Fujimori's right-hand man. He was literally hiding him in Venezuela. There are ties between Chavismo and Fujimorismo. So again, to these authoritarians, they don't care about left or right. They'll take help from whomever will help them like stay in power.
they don't care, and that they are the people that are pushing that rhetoric of you're either with us or you're either with them, and that's not healthy for a democracy. That's how a democracy dies. Pun
And
intended.
that brings me to like what I wanted to talk about, and I already mentioned it. Venezuelans who don't let you say anything bad about Guaido or the opposition, and also they happen to be the same, Venezuelan Americans who now, because they were super against Trump, now if you say anything bad about Biden, they're like, well, what? Are you a racist Trump supporter? Like, there's no nuance at all because of the trauma.
I mean, and that's fair. And you see that, like, let's go back to 2020. Let's rewind a year. It's August. Close your eyes. It's August of 2020. Shit's going down in the States. George Floyd protests, Black Lives Matters, the elections are around the corner, COVID's going on. How's Twitter like? How's Twitter swell like? How are the Venezuelan Americans feeling? What's the discourse?
It's funny now because I lost like 3,000 followers back then for being against Trump.
And
And
why? Did they call you a Democrat just when you were criticizing Trump?
They call me a pedo solana, but I guess that's my fault because do you know I invented the term magasolano?
Did you?
I did, and there's proof of that because they
Props
wrote
to you.
So thank you.
Props to you. What a queen.
So because I would use that term, then they started trying to be clever themselves, and they were like, "Well, you're a pedo solana," like to say that Biden was a pedophile, and I'm like, "Good."
Or even then, like, me criticizing Trump doesn't mean that I completely support Biden. Or someone that votes for Biden doesn't mean that they're in love with Biden. They just think that it's better than Trump.
How many Republicans like traditional conservatives from like the freaking Bush family was against Trump, but no, Juan Carlos from Los Teques is the biggest Trump supporter, and if you're against him, you're a socialist, even though like the Bush family was against Trump.
Because that's the mindset that we have. That's what we've been living for 20 years. Like, if it's you're either with us or against us, and that's the economy we have to break. We have to remember people that they can think about stuff for themselves.
That's happening in the US now. Like real progressives, like Maggie Haberman was a New York Times journalist who was on Trump, did like most like dirt that came out of the Trump White House. She reported on it. Every time she reports on Democrats, they destroy her on Twitter. Like, Maggie, you love Trump. Like, you're all about Trump. It's like, she's a journalist. Like, the culture where they think that you shouldn't criticize your side is so harmful.
It's so harmful because then we're just blindly following people. And that's not what democracy is. That's exactly the opposite of what a democracy is. We need to help our politicians accountable. And that's why you can never fall in love with a politician. You can like a politician.
That brings us to Governor Andrew Cuomo's resignation.
Who's Governor Andrew Cuomo for our listeners who are not familiar with the politics of the state of New York?
Well, he was the biggest, talking about August 2020. Let's go back to August 2020.
Now it's my time to close my eyes.
So it's August 2020. You're watching CNN, Andrew Cuomo is giving his daily press conference about COVID. People are tweeting that they are Cuomo-sexuals, including celebrities. They are saying that Andrew Cuomo is their sexual orientation because he's just so amazing. And he releases a book on leadership.
Is he handsome? Like, do you consider him handsome?
I don't want to answer that question.
No, no, no. That's a close question. It's a yes or no question.
I do think he's handsome. Are
Is
they
he?
gonna cancel me for saying?
No, no, no. I mean, say bonito, bonito. What are we gonna do about it?
I always thought he was handsome, and I thought I interned at CNN, and every time I would see Chris Cuomo too, I thought he was handsome. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie.
Now you're getting canceled. Continue, please. Cancel yourself.
You were supposed to protect me, Elu, from
No,
not getting.
I didn't sign shit.
Well, but a year later, it turns out that America's sweetheart, Andrew Cuomo. Well, first of all, I don't know if you've heard about his real crime, which was that he sent a bunch of elderly people back to their care homes where COVID got out of control and thousands died. We still don't know how many because his governorship
When
hit
was this?
This was last year, but this was happening as CNN was saying he was amazing. And as Chris, did you watch the interviews with Chris Cuomo and Andrew Cuomo where they were like joking that they were siblings? And Chris Cuomo got a huge, oh my God, I forgot the word in English, isopo.
Isopo. Ear brush.
It's not even an isopo. It's like the thing that you do the COVID test with. And then he got a huge one to make a joke like, oh, look, Andrew, this is big enough for your nose. Ha ha ha. So as soon as he got accused of sexual harassment, Chris Cuomo goes on his shows and says, well, guys, I know what's going on, but he's my brother, so I'm not going to be talking about the story, even though he had been interviewing him for COVID.
There you go.
So, and now after the investigation, the governor of New York has resigned.
CNN is disgusting. It's not as disgusting as Fox News, but it's up there. Thanks to our sponsor, CNN.
This is the one thing I got when I was an intern. Like I keep it like.
Aw, what do you drink there? You're 30?
No, I'm drinking coffee. But indeed, CNN, again, talking about how Trump drove insane so many people, CNN was probably like the biggest casualty of the Trump era.
CNN drives people crazy since forever. Like, you look at CNN and it's not news broadcasting, it's like entertainment. It's like you're walking into Transformers in the theater and you're gonna see like a Michael Bay movie. Like, everything's so flashy, the world's constantly ending. Everything's bad except the Democrats. So it's kind of fishy. And that creates a situation where you have the big media outlets, Fox News, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, etc., etc. You know more about that stuff than I do. And they all clearly have their bias, and they don't care about it to a point where it's ridiculous for people that actually know what's going on to read what they're saying and see what they're saying. So people have to go to fringe or independent journalists to figure out what's going on. Some of them are great. Some of them are crazy conspiracy theorists. And that just makes things even worse. So we need...
And that's why I get a lot of my information from news sites that progressives have deemed unacceptable. Like, I read the Daily Caller simply because no other outlet reports on things that I care about, because they will not say a negative thing about the left in any context. So that's actually something I'm wrestling with right now. And maybe like the people commenting can advise me. I like to write against communism and the far left. That's just particularly because of my personal experience, what I like to talk against. I also am very concerned about it because I see that people are confused about socialism. And as a young person, my friends, I see that they're believing the BS, whatever. And I can't do this in progressive media or even like establishment media of any kind. Like, only conservative media is interested in that take.
It's horrible because what... to people that are not informed, to people that are not Venezuelans, when they see that they're only talking about Venezuela in Fox News, then they associate Venezuela or the Venezuelan struggle to be with the right. And that's awful. That's awful, but that's the way they have to operate to make money. That's the way they have to operate because we know how everything runs in the States. But it's fucked, and I think that's part of the reason that you and I decided to open this space to kind of break that bubble, because we don't like anyone. We don't even like ourselves.
And we will criticize anyone in power, like we're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't, look what happened with Andrew Cuomo, like all the people that embarrass themselves.
Oh, so what were the accusations, by the way? We never got to that point. So what happened with Andrew Cuomo?
To be honest, I haven't read the full investigation, but the accusations are sexual harassment, that he would say inappropriate comments to his female staff.
11 women.
11, he even groped someone, they said. And then the worst part, he comes out saying, I'm not a creep, I'm just Italian.
¡Eh! No soy un psycho, soy maracucho. Perdón. Me caigo, perdón.
So, but you know what I find very telling of our culture and that things are not going the right way? He wasn't forced to resign for the scandal in the elderly people's homes where thousands died. He was forced to resign because of sexual harassment. Now, I don't know how I feel about that, because there was like no scandal really that was like, the press didn't care about the elderly people scandal, you know?
It seems like we've reached the point where news matter as much as they matter to the internet. If the internet cares about people in early homes dying, that's what's gonna hit the news. But if people care about, sexual harassment, that's what's gonna be on the news.
That's the problem with media and journalism right now. It's become almost like supply and demand, and it's not supposed to work that way. You're supposed to inform citizens.
Amen. And I get it. And that's a very complicated topic for journalism. And if anyone should know it was gonna be you, a journalist, is that how do you find the balance between being honest, being true to yourself, being true to what's going on, and making money? How do you become a successful outlet without clickbaiting? Do you know what I mean? It's tough. It's hard. I get it. But it's still wrong, and someone needs to call them out. So that's what we're here for.
That's also why I love, because it's true that like if you try to start an outlet, you're gonna have to have clickbait if you're gonna survive. But then you have outlets like Bloomberg who are funded by a billionaire. I do think those are projects that billionaires should invest in, because Bloomberg is one of few remaining sites actually that remain sane. I don't know if it's
Bloomberg's pretty good
or what, but they haven't lost it.
But it's a weird thing, because it's a thing of balance. Like, look for example at I think Washington Post is now owned by Amazon, by Jeff Bezos, and now ever since that move, they've been very silent about the union strikes, all the claims from the workers, and all that. And like you can see, there's something sketchy going on there. And on the other side of the coin, then you have public national media like CBC in Canada, BBC in the UK, which they're not, even if they're funded with public money, they are not free from falling into biases. So it's hard to find that balance. We just need to figure out how to do it, and quick.
It's supposed to be something like that here for us, and NPR has gone completely woke as well. So.
What about PBS? What's the deal with PBS?
No one watches that.
Nobody watches PBS? No. I like PBS. I watch PBS here.
What do you watch on PBS?
Documentaries.
About exactly. I feel like
about
people
stuff.
watch historical documentaries, but no one's watching the news there. Or like C-SPAN, watching Congress, no one's watching that.
But for example, here in Canada, I get my news from CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Channel, and it's obviously a little bit biased towards the Liberals, but I find it to be a very good medium overall to get my information from. Whereas private medias like, for example, in Canada, we have one called the Toronto Star, things like that. They're way more biased. So the fact that I have to go for a public broadcasting service to be informed, I don't like that. I don't like what's going on. I don't like that.
Yeah, I mean, at least you have that. Like, I think people won't agree with, not everyone will agree with me about NPR, but I've seen some headlines that are truly like, okay, we've lost them.
And at the same
Like,
time, we think about back home and that what's the state channel doing? It's been doing for the last 20 years.
well, we have to talk a little bit about this because that's the most Venezuelan thing. The video of BTV talking to the Olympic
Oh,
trainer or
that was
whatever.
TV's, which is the
TV.
same, the same
It's
state
different.
media.
I mean, I don't know how many state channels because this is what they would do. Chavez would do. He would close a private channel and then replace it with more state TV.
Yeah,
Um, on live TV, the journalist tells the interviewee, like, dude, no, you cannot be saying that the government is not helping the athletes. And then he tells his partner, ask him another question, ask him another question. Or you're
this
not
is
gonna
all
like
live TV, and like they don't even know how to stop it. It's so ridiculous. It's like, and you just look at the whole thing. Who I think the guy still running TVS is Winston Vallenilla, who's a fucking clown. And the or if you look at the broadcast of the 2016 Olympics, where when Michael Phelps was swimming, and they were like, "Oh well, Michael Phelps has the record that he earned in 1977 in the Munich Olympics, and Hitler didn't want to give him the medal," and like they're just saying that so confident on national television.
my
And
favorite was a moment of darkness, like in the broadcast. And a presenter from the US was like, oh, things got dark. I guess they lost electricity. It's like, no,
no,
honey.
baby, that doesn't happen. or they were translating the opening of some Olympics. It's like, we live in a time where selfishness is gaining ground, and the translator is like, vivimos en un tiempo donde los selfies están por todos lados. And like, that's just normal. That's just like, if that shit happened in any other country, I'm not even gonna talk about the first world. If that shit happened in Colombia, if that shit happened in Argentina, that would be national news. But that's a Wednesday afternoon for us.
What about when they steal like Disney movies to put on the state TV channels?
Now that's cool.
They're so against capitalism, but they would literally like they were showing what was the big one that had just like come out in the movies, the Pixar one that everyone loves, Soul. They
So
were showing
yeah,
Soul in state TV in Venezuela.
you know what? I'm gonna say it. If you're gonna be a criminal state, if you don't care about international law, at least start pirating some shit on your national network. Yeah, give me Soul, give me Kanye West new album. I don't care. If you're gonna do something bad, at least make it work for everyone.
So, the last thing I wanted to talk about, because we are recording on August 11th, so a month after the historic protest in Cuba. So actually today, and here I'm gonna be saying that a Republican did something good, so come cancel me. The Senate passed a bill to provide internet to Cuba.
Amazing. I don't know
Amazing.
how they're gonna do it.
I don't know either, but
Like,
I've heard that they have. I mean, again, the tankies are always talking about like the CIA is everywhere, pulling all. Where are they? I want them. Like, where is the CIA in this case?
in their heads.
Like, can't the CIA give them internet? I mean,
I don't know. I wish they can. I hope they will, because everything that's going on in Cuba, and like we were talking about this last time we had a discussion in Twitter Spaces. We were talking with G, who's a person Cuban living
yeah.
in the United States, I believe, and he kind of explains that, which is true, is that the reason why we're seeing this massive protest in Cuba, that they kind of, as you said, they kind of sparked like a month ago, but the freedom fighting movement in Cuba has been growing very quickly in the last few years, Movimiento San Isidro, etc. It's because they are gaining access to the internet, and now they're not only fed what they're being fed on the state media, on the state internet. Now they can see the world around them and realize how fucked up the things are in Cuba. So if the United States manages to achieve that, that's a big win. That's a big win, not only for the U.S. as a geopolitical actor, but for the Cuban people as well.
And way to interfere in a positive way. I mean, I'm sure
Absolutely.
there'll still be people that say, those evil Americans giving internet to the Cubans who want to live in poverty and darkness all day. And here are the evil Americans giving them Wi-Fi.
You remember fucking George? No, what's his name? The bassist from Pink Floyd,
Oh my God, is that
Roger
the
Waters. The motherfucker, when we were when we were trying to get food into the country, that was the whole purpose of that thing, and a little bit of propaganda. But the whole purpose was to get food and medicines into the country. He was mad about it. Maduro was mad about it because it's like, oh, eso viola nuestra soberanía. ¡Maldito! What do you mean?
I don't want to think about that chapter of our history. We've been through so much. Like, remember that? Remember the concert at the Venezuela-Colombia border? Remember that?
Remember Manuel Rosales?
Oh. No.
No. We're not going there.
Venezuelan PTSD on. Like, the trauma is too real.
No, we're not going there.
But speaking of trauma, that made Venezuelan support Trump and say that Biden was going to be soft on the Castros and whatnot. I wanted to point out a New York Times article that I tweeted this week that actually has pointed out that Biden has been harder on the Cuba regime than even Trump because, and a lot of Cuban Americans don't like this, like my friend Danny Rivera, who I mentioned, he wants Biden to remove the economic restrictions that Trump placed on Cuba because he says he can't send money to his family, whatever. Well, no, not only is the Biden administration saying they're not going to remove the Trump restrictions, but they have added some and they have sanctioned other officials. So clearly, Biden is taking a completely different turn
Approach.
on Cuba.
Yeah, it's not the same as Obama for sure. It's like a 180 degree of change there. It's more of a continuation of what Trump started doing. And
Yes.
that's, you know,
What do you think? What do you think about people like my friend who say this is only hurting, the talk of sanctions only hurting
Yeah.
the people, you can't send them money.
it's, especially with Cuba, it's difficult. I'm a firm believer in sanctions. I believe that sanctions have effect as long as you have a plan to actually have a regime change. Like, you cannot just pressure, like, let's be honest, the embargo in Cuba has been a complete failure. And if
Just kidding. I was about to say something stupid.
and if anyone has suffered because of the embargo, are especially the Cuban people. Like, the Cuban regime, they're all rich, they all have hotels, they all have nice cars. They don't care that there's an embargo. But if you're gonna have a plan to pressure the regime out or to pressure them into elections, conditions, freedom of speech, or whatever, sanctions are great. Sanctions are a good, I wouldn't say a passive way of doing this, but it's very passive compared to like an invasion or an intervention.
Really, like, the only thing you can do if you're going to try to help these people out without a physical intervention. That's why I don't understand the people who are against military intervention. I feel like they should be for sanctions. This is like the non-violent way.
This is a non-violent approach, but when you do it on a way that you're just making a statement, like, that's kind of what Trump did. The whole Trump thing with Venezuela was just a statement. Was just a statement to gain support from people in Florida. But because other than sanctioning Venezuela and recognizing Guaido, which is something that every other country in the world pretty much did, that stopped there.
I've recently learned something that actually the United States and 50 other countries accepted Guaido as the legitimate president was kind of all propaganda because the only two countries who actually changed their ambassadors and accepted Guaido people are Colombia and the US. So those are really the only countries that accepted Guaido.
In one hand, it's for a show, and the other hand, it's because of, actual power. If you need an ambassador to a country, even if it's a country that you're enemy with, you're gonna have it with the people in power, not with the people that say that they're the interim government or whatever.
Well,
and again,
the US said, okay, you guys are now the government.
Exactly, because the US can do it. United States. Because Colombia can do it, because they're right next to Venezuela, and because Venezuela, it's a big existential topic for Colombians and Colombian politics. So
For the whole region.
for the whole region, but for Colombia specifically, like there's 2 million or 3 million of us in Colombia. We're neighbors next door. Politicians in Colombia either support Maduro or don't support it, and that's like a big divide. So, like, I kind of get it, but if you're gonna sanction, if you're gonna recognize ambassadors, and you're not gonna do anything else, well, sanctions eventually start hurting the people more than they're actually helping them. And the guys in the government, they're still making millions of dollars. But in the case of Venezuela, it had an interesting effect, which was the dollarization of the economy. And you could argue that it did help, just not in the way that the US and every other country intended.
Well, the economy now, isn't it better than before?
I don't know if better.
The informal one, I mean, like, people are doing better.
Some people, in some bubbles, in some cities, but a huge, like a big chunk of the population, like a lot of people are doing a little bit better. And things that you couldn't find before, now you can find them as long as you have dollars to pay for them. But that's a direct consequence of all the sanctions. Since the government cannot sell their oil to the United States, which was buying 60% of our oil, they need to get money from somewhere else. They need to laundry their drug money somehow.
This is the people like forget the details. Like Chevron's still working in Venezuela. They keep giving them extensions.
Yeah.
So what do you agree? Do you agree with the oil sanctions into Venezuela?
I mean, I don't know. Because if sanctions would have been there to actually push the government to do something, and they managed to accomplish something, great. If sanctions would have been there and they didn't achieve anything, I would say bad. But something in between happened, is that nothing happened, but the economy got se dolarizó la economía. So I don't know. I think this is good for some people, but I don't think this was the intended result. But it is what it is.
Well, their argument is the sanctions will get the regime so desperate that then they'll come to negotiations.
Oh, they're comfy. They're comfy. They're in a better position now that they were back in 2019 when Guaido became president.
What you mentioned, again, Venezuelans don't like to hear this. Some Venezuelans, like half of it, some Venezuelans hate Guaido with a passion that like they're always showing it. And then the other ones, as we mentioned, don't say anything bad about the opposition because they're all we have. But the truth is, from what I hear from people inside Venezuela, Venezuelans are completely over the politics topic. They're just trying to survive. They don't care about Guaido. They don't care about Maduro. They're not going to go protest. They're completely disappointed with everything. They hate the opposition just as much as they hate Maduro, and they're just over it.
And I feel that, and at least in my group of friends, which is obviously it's not a good, doesn't translate to the whole country, but I feel that people outside of the country tend to care more about what's going on in Venezuelan politics than the people living in Venezuela, because they know there's nothing to care about. Like, you tell people in Venezuela, it's like, oh, do you hear about the negotiations? They're like, what negotiations? Because it doesn't matter to them. Nothing's going to change. They're just trying to survive. They're just trying to put food on the table.
Absolutely. And those of us outside, because we're not spending every second trying to just get water or survive, we focus more on it. But when you're in it, like, people are just, and these are people who have gone to protest how many times,
So many
and
times.
the decisions failed them over and over again. So for those people who ask, well, what do you suggest? The first thing I would suggest is there are certain names in the opposition leadership that have to just disappear.
Tell them.
No more. You've had your chance. No more. Retire.
Tell them.
I'm not going to say those names, but I think people...
I'm gonna say Capriles, coño. Ya está.
Capriles es obvio. Like, Capriles is obviously one of them. Like,
Ya
the
está,
guy...
Capriles, ya está.
Ya está, man.
Ya está, marico, ya está. Julio Borges, ya está, ya pasó.
Henry Ramos Alú.
Ya pasa, Henry, like, go drink whiskey in an island in the Caribbean.
Wife is always on Instagram showing her mansion. Y dice, oh, spring is here. It's like, girl, what spring? You're in Caracas. There are no seasons. Like, what are you talking about?
The eternal spring.
Just enjoy that. No, he has to still be trying to jodernos, man. Like, please.
We need those people to retire. We need a new generation of politicians that are tired, as you and I are, of all this bullshit. To kind of make a change. And I'm gonna say something. I feel that if we're ever gonna get close to take down the regime from inside, from within, with our own civic effort, it's gonna be when someone or anyone really starts leading an opposition that is not linked in any way to the classic political opposition.
The
And
only way.
this could be everywhere. Like, it could be the student movement if they ever get their shit together. It could be the syndicates or the unions. It could be the doctors. It could be anyone, but please, please, anyone but Capriles.
There are so many people who in Venezuela, there's so much talent. There's just people who go into, the popular areas to like try to help people out, to feed them. Like someone like that. That's the type of leadership that we need. No more Leopoldo Lopez, man. Like, come
Please,
on.
please, let it end. Let's just let it end. Let's forget about the G4. Like, I don't ever want to see Primera Justicia. I don't ever want to see Un Nuevo Tiempo. Like, let's just
For
move
those
on.
who don't understand the history, the fact that Chavez got to power complaining about the biggest political party at the time, the Adecos, like that helped get Chavez to power because people were so tired of los Adecos, and los
Copia.
Adecos are still there. They're still there. Like, that should tell you the ineptitude of the opposition leadership.
And like, there's no support. And I'm gonna say this, like, there hasn't been any support for a while now. And when the opposition decides to call people to the streets, people don't go out they don't go out for you. They don't go out for Capriles. They don't go out for Leopoldo. They don't go out for Henry Ramos. They just take advantage of the opportunity that the opposition is calling people to the streets to actually go out and express their hatred towards the government. You can even see that in the protests. I protest all my life in Venezuela, literally since I was a kid, because my mom also liked to protest. And the last years, 2014, 2015, 16, and 17, that I was in Venezuela, you could see that in the protests. The politicians were trying to tell us what to do, and people were not listening. And not because they're disorganized, not because they're rebels, but because nobody gives a fuck about the opposition.
We hate them. It's like
We all hate them.
absolute rejection.
But, and I will say something very important, and I want everyone to listen to me. This is very important. You hate the opposition, probably. I know I do. I know Hair does. But never, never put the opposition at the same level as the government. That's exactly what the government wants. And that's what a lot of people like doing. They like blaming Guaido as much as Maduro for the crisis in Venezuela. And I could say that Guaido is useless. I can say that he's corrupt. But I would never put him in the level of Nicolás Maduro. I don't know what you think.
No, like not at the level. I don't even think about Maduro. Like, I just like to talk about Chavez because I don't want anyone to forget that he's the one. Like, Maduro.
Motherfucker.
But no, of course they're not to blame for the crisis, but they have blame in not taking advantage of the opportunities that have been presented to them.
100%. 100%. The only thing that I'm saying is that don't put them on the same level as the government. A lot of people love doing that.
It's useless to do that because you can hold them accountable without equating one thing. It's just they each have their role, and the regime has failed providing a good life for its citizens, and the opposition has failed in overthrowing the regime. And the reasons for that, a lot of us believe, is a lot of corruption within the opposition.
And hopefully one day you guys will get tired and just go to the Dominican Republic and live the rest of your days there and let a new generation take over. A generation that's less corrupt and more motivated to get Chavez out. Maduro out of.
What do you want your representatives in Mexico right now how do you want them to represent you? Stalin, porque Capriles mandó a Stalin.
How would I like them to represent us? Okay.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, when they're not useless, I feel that before having any elections, You need to free the political prisoners. You need true and free freedom of speech, especially for the media, because you cannot have an election without an independent media. And third, that everyone who's banned from running, including people that I don't like Maria Corina and Capriles and Leopoldo, they should be allowed to run. Because if you decide who gets to run, that's still not a democracy. So if we don't get, those are like the minimum conditions that we need, or that I would like to see before I would be called for an election. As it is today, I don't advise people to go to vote. I feel that going to vote under the conditions that we currently have, it's just validating the regime. I feel if anything, it hurts the opposition more than it helps. But in an ideal world, those are the conditions that I would like. What about you?
I'm not gonna tell you what my conditions would be because it's silly. I'm gonna tell you what's gonna happen.
You don't want to tell me anything.
I'm gonna tell you what's going to happen.
Tell me what's going to happen.
Big part of the official opposition. I don't know if Guaido will get on it or not, but Capriles and the intellectual class of Venezuela, the first world Latin American experts, Wola, Francisco Rodriguez, all these people are going to go to elections in November and legitimize the regime. That's what's going to happen.
And we're going to be here making fun of them. Thank you so much for watching our first episode.
Because this is also relevant. I always tell Edu, I want the people suffering under regimes across the world that liberal democracies don't seem to care about, that tend to be far left, or they call themselves dictatorships and the world just ignores them. So, Nicaragua, Cuba, Syria, Iran, the authoritarian government in Turkey, things like that. All of their activists are so similar to what we're saying right now, and they just try to tell the world, please do not try to negotiate with the criminals that are holding us hostage. That's what Iranian activists say, that's what Syrian activists say, Nicaraguans, Cubans. So those of us who know our regimes, we know that negotiating doesn't really work. So yeah, and we want this space to not only be a space where we fight for Venezuelan democracy, but for democracy in all these places that media just doesn't like to talk about for whatever reason.
So here's your house. If you're Nicaraguan, if you're Cuban, if you're Venezuelan, if you're Syrian, if you're from Hong Kong, if you're from Iran, if you're from any regime around the world that's oppressing its people, doesn't matter if it's from the left, doesn't matter if it's from the right, this is your space. This is your space, so just get in touch with us and we'll try to help you as much as we can.
Absolutely. And we'll fight the tankies who tell us we're just mad because they took our slaves.
So until Soros pays us, what do we want to say to our audience today?
So you can find us here on YouTube every Thursday for now. This might change because Edu and I are still not funded by the CIA, so we have other jobs. But we're going to be here weekly, and sometimes whenever we have shit to talk, we'll go live and hopefully interact with you guys. And this is Hemingway. He's going to be part of it as well. And Edu has a cat too, but he hates him, so he's never around.
I hate my cat?
No, your cat hates you.
Oh yeah, he hates me. Fucker.
And I want to point out that Edu made his bed in honor of you guys.
All right, thank you so much for watching, guys. It's been such a pleasure for the first episode. I don't think we have to discuss anything else today. So thank you for watching. Stay from the north, stay frosty.